Hey everybody, this is Jen Kleinhens.
And I'm Rob Vose.
And you're listening to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, a podcast where we talk about our thoughts and opinions on marketing, from customer experience to brand and everything in between. Join us today as we talk to Nicole Taylor, CEO of advertising firm Catorce in Barcelona. Now, unfortunately, during this interview, I had just gotten my first dose of the Pfizer vaccine and I was feeling a little bit under the weather, so Rob jumped in and he led the interview with Nicole.
So yeah, we've been lucky on this podcast, episode 32 now, to have some fantastic guests, and today is no exception. Very happy to say that we're joined by an extraordinary marketing veteran, somebody who's been in the agency world for a while, someone who's been CEO of multiple sort of agencies throughout Australia and now in Barcelona. And we'd love to welcome to the podcast Nicole Taylor. Welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
It's very kind of you to come on and join us. At the start of pretty much every interview, we do what we call the credibility section. So for people, we have people listening in from, South America, all over the place. So we try and do a bit of a description of you and your career and how you've got to where you are and where you currently are. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick summary for the listener, that would be fantastic.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I've got the privilege of living in Barcelona. Very unusual choice for a Australian girl who has never lived abroad, has had a career in advertising for over 20 years in Australia. And you'd expect by that stage of my career, a change to a country where you don't even speak the language hardly seems feasible. However, I am here. And it does feel like a privilege because it's a beautiful city. It's very community-based. It's very much about humanity and not work kind of overtaking living. So I've learnt lots of things in my time here, even during a pandemic, by the way. So that in itself could have been traumatic, but I must say Barcelona, even with all the extreme, I guess, cases of COVID, was still a beautiful place to be. Career-wise, I touched on it, over 20 years in the Australian advertising industry. Unusual again for a girl from Cessnock, and for the listeners, Cessnock is not a particularly famous place in Australia. You usually say the Hunter Valley because it's just a bit posher and a better reference point for people, the wine country. But I come from Cessnock, which is a working class town, a coal mining town, essentially. Yes, there's lots of wine in the kind of region. Very humble beginnings. Moved to around a lot as a kid, so always I guess learnt to adapt and change. I think I went to 13 different schools as a child, which is a lot.
Okay.
Never really lived in a major city, but lived in, sometimes quite busy places, lived in the outback, all, great kind of spectrum of, I guess, of towns across Australia. Eventually kind of settled in the outskirts of Sydney with my mum, where she got more settled and we all got more settled. Went to Wollongong University, studied environmental science. So I didn't even consider marketing or advertising as a career back then. I was a science and maths kind of student. And I loved that subject matter. I could, I had a clear, I guess, vision for it around, the environment wouldn't always be this kind of thing on the side for the greenies. It would have some place in the commercial world at some point in time. But what I couldn't deal with was the science students were a little dull, I must say. And I was kind of going, where's all the action? Where are the cool people hanging out? And of course, it was the marketing department or the marketing degree. So I flipped over to that and quickly completed it. Didn't completely understand it. It didn't seem as definitive as a science degree. There wasn't a real right or wrong answer. It felt a lot more subjective and opinion-based, even to me in those days, and landed a first job in advertising. And in those days, it was actually hard to get a job. I remember I had to apply, like it was one time in Australia's history where you weren't guaranteed a kind of job. Unemployment was as high as it had ever been. I think I had to apply I think I got to about 50 jobs before I kind of landed a job.
Crikey.
And it happened to be a family advertising agency in the city. And it changed my life, clearly. I loved it. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the problem solving. I fell in love with the relationship part of the business, which is, critical to kind of selling those solutions, being trusted to kind of implement solutions on behalf of clients. I fell in love with working with creative people and just, kind of being in the room with them, their lateral brains and almost supporting that product. And I just kind of iterated from there. I went to, big shops like George Patterson Bates, which was the biggest shop in town at the time, around the year 2000. I worked in an agency called VCD, which was the hottest independent agency at the time. Simon Reynolds and George Betzis, who were highly awarded, besties with Droga. That kind of reputation where the creative kind of dominated every interaction. I worked at Y&R. I worked at a number of great agencies in Sydney and had the privilege of meeting lots of people. But I always kind of had an understanding equally of, and you and I probably talked about this, Rob, since we've worked together, but, direct, I kind of came up through those disciplines. So I wasn't, the big advertising TV chick. I kind of had this appreciation and understanding of catalogues of, I got the privilege of working with Ian Kennedy at George Patterson. I was influenced by, the kind of complete works of communication, not just the big end of town in terms of the advertising TV production. So it was a wonderful career. It was generous. I always had opportunities. I always met amazing people. So that's not a short summary at all, but it's
but it's fascinating. I think it's always interesting to hear the sort of the ways people get into this industry, and some people it was always going to be the thing. And for some people, they kind of fell into it. So, as Nicole said, we did work together at DDB in Australia, and you have sort of been CEO of a few agencies in your time, and we've been very lucky to have on MDs and CEOs of agencies on this podcast in the past. And I've always asked them the first one, this first question. I've always asked them because I think it's interesting to start to get different comparisons. So we've had people like in an independent direct response shop. We've had people from America. So Liz Roach, who's MD and CEO of Havas CX Helia in Chicago, and a bunch of different people on. So the kind of, it seems to be the kind of perceived wisdom that the agency model is, it sounds dramatic, but beset from all sides. So things like clients taking creative and work in-house, large consulting firms moving in and buying up agencies and buying up creatives. There seems to be less retainer work and more project-based stuff. There's more technology, which is becoming more and more complex. Are you seeing those challenges? And sort of how do you go about? There's a lot on there. So what are the ones that are really causing you sleepless nights, I suppose, that you're trying to wrangle and get your head around how you respond to?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, I describe it as we're an industry that's lost its mojo a little. And look, I was quickly, in some ways, corrected when I kind of read some of the kind of acknowledged creative leaders recently, and I think it was Campaign Brief last night. And some of those, I'd never heard of these agencies or people, and I was buzzing. I went, thank goodness. Wow. It sounds like there's some super interesting, diverse people coming back into this industry and making it great again. So I've started to feel like culturally we've lost our edges, that we can't attract the most creative people. So therefore we're a bit lacking in the magic. There's a conservatism that kind of strangely crept in and kind of made us a bit safe and a bit lacking in confidence, maybe even as a result, I guess, of all this complexity. What, are we on solid ground? Do we have a real expertise in that place? Are we kind of making it up? Are we winging it? So I think our foundation got a bit wobbly, and we started to compromise. And so I've always felt that we've kind of lost our energy, lost our spark as an industry, and that's been something that I've been really determined around. And I think you can gain that through your people, right? If you're attracting, really varied, types of people. This is where diversity becomes kind of crucial. Yes, it's the right thing to do. Equally, it creates a super creative, experience and hopefully product. So I've been, really intrigued and surprised and impressed by the creative ambition of clients in putting it into their own businesses. We don't have an ownership on creativity, and I think when clients recognise its power and have a go at it themselves, then I'm impressed by that, because I think that's a great ambition. And I think in some cases they've been more creative and more successful at that than certainly some agencies. So it just proves, if you kind of make that a real choice, i.e. creativity, no matter what business you're in, there's benefits to kind of creating the conditions for that to happen. So I don't think there's any right or wrong way. I just believe that to be genuinely creative, you need to take risks. You need to have a culture that allows that to happen. You need different points of view. You need to collaborate. This is one of the biggest things that I appreciate now, is bringing other people to the table who aren't on my payroll, who don't belong to the group, who I'm not going to get some kickback from or some extra bonus if I introduce them. They're just legitimately wonderful, interesting people that are open, and that I want to, kind of introduce to the client and find some ways of working with them so we get a better, product out the other end. So, and Barcelona's, particularly kind of, made me feel that, because there's so many interesting people here who are kind of small entrepreneurs who are really open to partnering with bigger corporations. So,
do you think that
it's a long answer, but it's
no, it's a good. Do you think that change from you were in Sydney for 20 years or so? Do you think that change of scenery has also, they always that old phrase, the change is as good as a rest, right? So has that sort of refreshed your batteries a little, the change of scenery and new people and meeting different people?
100%. And I think I don't know that I told everyone, this feeling when I left. I felt like I'd given out for so long and hadn't had any inspiration in. It felt like the country itself had lost its mojo, and I can say that being a veteran of the industry and someone who's never lived anywhere else. I felt flat, and I thought that, the government's making really lame choices. It feels like the conservatism, has gone mad. And I had trouble finding inspiration in the context of Sydney and more broadly Australia. I was kind of disappointed. And definitely when I arrived in Barcelona, because creativity here is not an industry thing, it's a lifestyle. It kind of exists in the real world. There's galleries and expressions of creativity are kind of down the street daily. It's not kind of saved for our industry or other industries. It's just alive and well in all sorts of ways. So I kind of felt definitely inspired and kind of just felt like I was getting inputs as opposed to me having to be the source of that inspiration, which, may be good sometimes and less good on other occasions. So, yeah, definitely. The context helped me. The different context helped me.
That inputs outputs argument is an interesting one. There's musically I'm a bit of a heavy metal hard rock guy, and bear with me on this. There's a guitarist called Richie Kotzen, hugely talented, and he always says that in order for me to output songs, I have to have downtime. and inputs, not downtime necessarily, but inputs, something different. Because if I'm always writing songs, I'm always on tour, I can't then, I get stale, and I need to switch it up and do something different. Like he was talking about building a deck on the back of his house, but just something completely different. Obviously you've done that, but the change of scenery, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Because I think it's the power of going for a walk, though, isn't it? Like, I think, some simple things can kind of get you to, just allow your brain to kind of operate in a different way. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I think what's interesting is when you talk about the Sydney sort of and Australia and that kind of stagnation might be too strong a word, but I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit. There was a quote when we were talking about questions. There's the quote that I sent you from Mark Ritson, and anyone who knows me knows I'm a fan of marketing curmudgeons. I don't know why, but Mark Ritson, Bob Hoffman, people like that. And he said, I'm going to read this quote, and obviously you've seen it because I've already told you, but for the audience, he said this. He said, to some degree, the agencies have also been the agents of their own downfall. Whisper it quietly around Soho. He's sort of referring to London here, but most of these agencies now all offer the same thing. Everyone offers creative and planning. Everyone can now do above the line promotional and digital. Everyone has an impressive showreel of campaigns and clients from the yesteryear. Everyone now targets mid-sized firms and the big behemoths. All these agencies bang on about the power of creativity. Each claims a focus on effectiveness. They all win a big bag of lions at Cannes every year. But like the long run of super yachts that overlook La Croisette at the Port du Cannes, despite their different names and flags, they are all fundamentally the same. And I found that really interesting because in an industry that talks a lot about distinctiveness, we're going to go all Byron Sharp here, it seems to me sometimes that agencies maybe don't take the advice they give their clients from a developing distinctiveness perspective. And I'd be interested to get your perspective on that quote and on that kind of idea of creating distinctiveness from a brand and an agency perspective.
Yeah, I think he's right. I agree. I think it all got a bit vanilla and a bit same. And he talks about even the talent kind of rotating amongst the usual suspects, which is probably a big part of the problem. But I think I'm thankful that through COVID, it seems to have forced some of the networks certainly to think about strategy in a more meaningful and choiceful way, because strategy is choice, right? And I think we're guilty of not making choices for sure as an industry representing some of the bigger networks. We kind of do it all, and the variation in the proposition is nothing of any real value or meaning. The way we charge, but I'm watching the rise of the independents again, and that's not unique to Australia. There's a lot happening in Australia, which I think is awesome. But, even here, some great independents. America, UK, there's some new independents. And I think they are offering something more distinctive. And I think that they are taking more risks and backing themselves and having more interesting people lead them and or join them. So I think that's coming back, but 100% guilty of, telling our clients to take more risks. Why aren't they brave enough to kind of do X, Y, and Z? And I'm going, are we? How brave have we been in this process? Are we really putting our jobs on the line? And I'm saying that, as a broad industry perspective. So I think we. Been guilty of all those things, and it's, if we want to truly prosper into the future, then we need to be distinctive. We need to have a clear point of view, and we need to be able to back up that point of view and stand by it, like any great brand would.
Absolutely.
So I loved it. I'm glad you kind of raised it, because. But I do think it's changing. Whether I believe in those strategies and choices on behalf of some of the agencies is a different story, but at least they're making them. At least they're saying, media monks, we are this. We come from this perspective, and this is what you're going to get when you come and, experience us. And they're winning. They've certainly got some momentum. And I think because there is a clear difference, and it sounds modern, and it sounds like I'm going to get a new experience as a customer, as a client.
I think the point that you made, I think that's the thing that strategically people always miss is, I think the phrase you said, which was fantastic, which is strategy is a choice. And it's not just a choice of what you do, but it's also a choice of what you choose not to do. And I think that's the bit that people don't do. They're not prepared to kind of go, do you know what? That's just not us. We'll pass that up. And this is what we do, and we'll stay in that lane. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I think you got to be able to articulate like you say, what aren't you doing bits to.
As we talked about, you've been sort of in the agency world for 20 years or so now, and a lot has changed in those 20 years. What are those things that you look at and you think, that's good, I'm glad that changed from what it used to be? And what are the changes where you're maybe lamenting for the past a little? That's a very poetic way of putting it, but lamenting things that used to be. Is it
two things that really stand out to me? I think diversity. Finally, women in senior positions, and just genuinely a more inclusive, kind of set of expectations, right? I think that's happening now, and I think there's some momentum, and in some cases even a bit of an advantage for a woman. And I get, as you know this, Rob, it hasn't been like that. That is just not the way it's been. And there's still some battles to be had, but I think it's fundamentally, transformative and clearly one of the best things that's happened, that we've kind of now in this space where that's a desirable kind of talent to have, and more opportunities for females in creative departments everywhere. Brilliant, tick. And then then ethnicity, socioeconomic, then there's everything else that goes with that. So I love that. I think that's fundamental to us being creative into the future. And then my second one, which is, I think the independents are getting this anyway, is media, separating media. Bad idea. Guess what? Not so bad idea now. It's a good idea again. And I just think the client wants the full solution, or the real solution where they're going to get the full impact. They need those things kind of talking to each other seamlessly. They need a strategy that's cohesive. They need both the right arm and left arm working together. So I'm not surprised again that startups are thinking that way, that even some networks are kind of pulling that in more closely, because I think it's fundamental.
Okay.
So they're the two big ones for me.
Cool. It was interesting. You talked about diversity, and we've done stuff on this podcast around ageism, and I've asked this question again of a lot of the sort of marketing leaders, which I'll use a collective term, that we've had in the podcast around whether that's ageism, sexism, racism. I think even things like neurodiversity now. We're starting to see that, especially with COVID, in terms of people who are introvert, extrovert. How do you get the best out of people? So from your perspective, what sort of things are you doing at your agencies, or have done in the past, that you think have been really successful, so that people who may be listening to this can think, oh, okay, I might nick that and try it at ours.
Yeah, good. Let's get that list together.
Yeah.
Again, lucky Barcelona headquarters for a global kind of business. We've got no problems attracting nationalities or lots of nationalities from all corners of the globe. So we're lucky. We've got 29 different nationalities in the agency. So it's a melting pot, and it's beautiful, and there's different languages being spoken all day, every day. We did a really simple thing, which is just a cultural awareness initiative, which I loved. And you've just got to come at it through the perspective of, kind of myth-busting stereotypes. So you kind of go, look, you think this country is this, but here's some facts or perspectives that kind of challenge that stereotype. And I just love that little tension and way of presenting culture, which I found really effective, because it always gets staff really engaged and kind of, more empathetic to understanding, people better. I think, I always challenge on the recruitment side, any of those notions around, portfolios being the only way of, judging even a short list of creative people. That reminder that people aren't given the same opportunities.
Yeah.
So therefore, why would a portfolio represent them, kind of equal? So therefore, how do you kind of get a greater sense of potential as opposed to what's in that portfolio? And the portfolios are everything to some of these hiring managers in the past, right? That's it. That's all they'd look at. So I've challenged that and had some success because, like I said, potential's a whole different way of hiring, and that and can be more instinctive, so it's even a little less sure, so it comes with some risk. I think some deliberate, even promotions where you're putting people who in some cases you might not feel like they're ready, but I kind of go, let's see what happens when we do create that opportunity for people. Especially if we think they're going to represent diversity in a significant way, because they're leaders of that as well as the the kind of craft and discipline themselves. So I think some of those choices have been really meaningful. It's just always it should always just be a topic. I think if you kind of make it this really constant dialogue around how we achieving that, how we making sure our people are well supported in terms of being different, and equally how we attracting different people into our business.
Absolutely.
You can really
I think it's that constant kind of vigilance. Sounds a bit dramatic, but that constant vigilance and making sure that you are always on top of this, and those unconscious biases aren't creeping back in, and all that sort of stuff. Completely agree on that. We touched briefly on the pandemic, which has been life-changing for, let's say, pretty much everybody on the planet. It's an interesting moment now. In the UK, certainly, vaccinations have been improving, and we're kind of moving into the world of kind of post, what model is going to work? Is it a hybrid model? Is it working from home? Is it not? Whatever. What impacts, obviously, has the pandemic had on your agency, and how have you kind of kept people together? And then when things are quote unquote more normal, I mean, who knows what that's actually going to look like? Where do you think you're heading in that kind of future model perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Some of the opinions I had at the beginning of this journey have changed, through the journey. I mean, we have been lucky in that we've got this wonderful kind of office space. The picture I showed you previously.
Yes, your view is spectacular,
and it's quite spectacular. And we do COVID testing every week, and so we've had 80% of our workforce back since September last year.
Wow,
which is very unusual. Very unusual in the world of DDB. And we did that because we wanted, we just went, it's a great space for us to go to. There's a whole heap of young people here who didn't have any room to work from and found it difficult to work. So they were desperate to come back to work. There was some, family men and women who, had some young children and were struggling to kind of work productively at home. It started off well. We were hugely productive at the beginning, and then you could kind of start to notice that people needed some kind of alternative. And Barcelona is a small place, so catching transport was less of an issue back then, and still is in a way. So people could get here fairly easily, and we made it super, super safe. And it cost us a lot of money, but I went, stuff that, this is important to us. We're a new management team. It feels like the right thing to do. We're an agency built around one main client. Our client was back in the office. It had some they had some expectations too. So it just all made sense to us to do it that way. And, the social distancing in the office, we still wear masks all day, every day. The protocols in lifts, all that, you just learn to live in that world. And having lived in it now for a long time, it's just normal, right? We walk around in masks, we can't all sit in the lunchroom and eat and, blah, blah, blah. I think for us, and I think it is unique on the circumstances, and should be considered this way, I call it some flexibility is the right thing. So I go, you don't have to come into the office every day. That just seems silly to even kind of position things that way now.
Yeah.
And I quite enjoy working from home, once or twice a week as well. So that's the kind of model we'll adopt here.
Yeah.
And in some cases, some people don't want to come in, and that's fine too. But on the whole, people do. We've started going to the chiringuitos on the beach, so it's worth, you get a bit of a treat if you do bother to come in.
Nice.
And we were desperate to build a culture, because I think I touched on it. We were a new team, and people didn't know us, and that made it twice as hard to kind of motivate and connect when people go, I don't know you from a bar of soap. In fact, I don't even understand you.
Yeah.
You speak really fast English.
So how long was it before when you started? What was the gap between when it started and then COVID hit full scale?
October, November, December, January, February. So
about 5 or 6 months.
Not even 6 months. Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that's no time at all, is it?
It's not
Crikey.
much. And look, and I had a new CSO and CCO who came after me, so they're even less. Anyway, it's somewhere in between. Like you say, hybrid is the right answer, I think.
Yeah.
What that looks like, I'm not sure exactly, and it's dependent on your circumstances.
That's fair enough. And finally, it's kind of a difficult question, this one, because obviously COVID has kind of screwed us around, but both you and I have something in common, which is, and Jen as well, who sadly obviously isn't here today, but we've all moved countries and gone and worked somewhere different. My path was a lot simpler than yours, because I was moving to a country that spoke essentially the same language, and so it was a lot easier for me. But still, there were challenges of a different culture. And for somebody, it might not be the case in the near future, but for somebody who is thinking about that in the future, moving countries, what have been the best bits and what have been the challenges? How is your Catalan, for example?
Horrendous. I mean, there's no downside to doing this, in my view. And, I'm doing this fairly late in my career. And the main reason being, you kind of learn to laugh at yourself again. You do some ridiculous things, in a country that you've mastered almost, where you've lived all your life, where you've got childhood friends, your reputation is, well known, and therefore, you've got all these buffers. You arrive somewhere where you buy the wrong soap. Well, it's not even soap for your body. It's, moisturizer. You're the fool. It's so refreshing and good for the soul, I found. All those, it just resets you in the most magnificent way, in a very humbling way. And for me, yes, there's hardship. The amount of times the anxiety would go up when I was going to the pharmacy, because I went, I honestly don't know if I'm going to get someone who can speak English and whether I'm going to come out with the right thing. But, you step into that arena and you push through and you go in and you somehow make it out the other side. So I found it wonderful, because it's the opposite of the privilege in some ways that I've had in Australia, and I've learned to be a bit useless. My Spanish is, not only do I speak no Catalan, my Spanish is pathetic as well. And it's just, I learn it, for God's sake. I even have a teacher, but I can't. I'm rewiring my brain, and some days it sticks and most days it doesn't, and it's just, I can feel my brain almost kind of heating up from trying so hard. But it's just the most wonderful learning experience. And yes, I miss my family. Yes, I miss so many aspects, but I'm living in a completely different culture, and I'm learning very new things. And there's so many things that the Spanish do that I think I will adopt forever.
Wow.
Like drinking a beer on a Saturday at 9:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
No, it's a beautiful culture. It's intergenerational. It's kind, it's generous, it's family. and they work to live, not live to work. And I think there's a big message in that, and one that I've had to learn, because that's not the way I was brought up in terms of my work ethic. So I'm desperately trying to adopt some of those better practices. So I mean, honestly, if you back yourself as someone who's quite resilient and capable of adapting, this is the most extraordinary experience for sure that I've ever done, for both my wife and daughter as well.
Yeah, I imagine your daughter's picking up the lingo a little bit faster than you are.
Oh, yes. And my teacher said to me, she said, the best chance that you have is when your daughter starts teaching you.
Start speaking Spanish to each other. How fantastic. Well, I mean, I would agree in terms of the move. I think, look, it's funny, as delighted, and my parents do occasionally listen to these, so mum and dad, I'm delighted to be home to the UK to be able to see you, and my sister, if she's listening. I miss Sydney every day. There isn't a day goes past when I don't think about it. So it does kind of, the move, it does get into your blood, I think, eventually. Even if you end up going back, you still, there's a romantic kind of hankering. I forget the days of doing pictures until God knows what in the morning and all that sort of stuff, and being too hot on the train and all those kind of things. And you just remember the amazing stuff. Well, look, it's been fantastic having you on. We appreciate it. At the end of your day, really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, you did it. We've wasted another perfectly good half an hour or so with Rob and Jen and the Everybody Hates Your Brand podcast. Again, you can find us on everybodyhatesyourbrand.com and your podcast platform of choice. And if you happen to be a YouTube user and you're interested in behavioral science applied to customer experience and marketing, then check out my new YouTube channel called Choice Hacking. Just search Choice Hacking on YouTube. Have a week.
Take great care and be vigilant.